So welcome to part 2 of our orientation and overview on AI videos. Our first video, we were just talking about AI in general. What is it as a technology, and how explaining how AI essentially is really like a brain. It's a neural network, very different from algorithmic programming. And we also talked about what kinds of AIs are there. There are AI is a big term, and so we talked about how there's large language models, there's image models, audio models, and video models, and then we went through who are the main players in each of those spaces. And while that stuff is going to change, of course, over time, most of those types and players are going to be consistent for the most part. In this video, we're going to go a little deeper. It might not be quite as evergreen as the previous video. Things might change a bit more, but we want to talk about some key terms, some definitions, things you should at least know what they mean when you're hearing about AIs and their basic capabilities, as well as some of the more recent advancements, which will probably change pretty quickly because things advance so quickly, and then some just basic concepts. How do we think about AI? How do we use this? How do we integrate this, not into work, but into our daily lives? So we'll talk a little bit about that. So we're going to begin with some terminology, some basic lingo, and you just have to get used to some of these terms. If you think about terms relating to computers, that before computers hit the world, nobody knew what a kilobyte was, what a megabyte was, what a gigabyte was, or today a terabyte. We didn't even have any sense of scale or scope there. So, back then, we had to get used to that. We wanted to know how much would my floppy disk hold, or how much would my zip drive hold, or how much would my thumb drive hold? How many gigabytes will that hold? And now pretty much everybody has a general sense of like how much stuff you can put on a drive based on how many gigabytes it holds, for example. Well, in the same way, AIs have different kinds of aspects to what they hold, or how big they are, or how they work. And so we want to cover some of this basic terminology. So, Adam, why don't you jump in
Mhm.
and walk through some of the main terms, the things that people at least
Mhm.
should have some understanding that it's a thing, and what it is in general, so they can understand what people are talking about when they're evaluating these AIs.
Yeah, so the first term I would say is the prompt. So that's basically what you're putting into the model. When you type into ChatGPT, write a paper about cats, please, that's your prompt.
Mhm.
So you'll put in a prompt, you'll get a response, you can put in another prompt and keep the conversation going to do whatever it is you're trying to do. And a
Mhm.
prompt is just your input to the model.
Right. And just one of the things that Ironwood helps to do is we have our calls and our services is help people to get better at doing that, right? Because
Mhm.
you can be better or worse at how you structure a prompt to get good results. That's
Mhm.
a part of what we need to have learn how to do in this age of AI.
Garbage in, garbage out. If
Yep.
you're putting in a prompt that's vague and doesn't specify what it really needs to do, then you're going to get a bad result. And it's not the model's fault, it's your
Right.
prompt.
Right.
So then the next term that I would go into is tokens. So tokens are how the model responds. Like autocomplete that guesses what your next word is going to be as you're typing. These LLMs predict the next token. And a token it can be a word or a part of a word, and on average it's going to be three-quarters of a word. It's basically how much space is in a prompt or a result. So a token is about three-quarters of a word. So if you upload a 50,000 word book, then that's going to be about 66,700 tokens or so. And that's going to depend on the exact tokens you're putting in, but on average, it's going to be three-quarters of a word.
So when you hear people
So
talking
when
about tokens, you're basically thinking, how big is the space? How big is the thumb drive? How big is the disk space
mhm,
that this prompt can take in?
yeah,
And
how
that's
much
how many tokens it has
yeah,
available.
how much information can you give the model before
Mhm.
it starts losing what was at the beginning?
Mhm.
So that sort of leads to our next term, which is the context window. And the context window is how many tokens that the AI can basically keep in its head at once. Uh, Today, most models will have at least 128,000 tokens. That's the standard, 128K. So that means you could fit in a couple of books in there, a couple of average size books, and you're going to be able to have the model understand that and answer questions about it. As soon as you pass the end of the context window, it's going to start forgetting what's at the beginning. So if you tell it at the beginning of your prompt, hey, I want you to summarize these books and pull out key storylines, and then you give it three books, that's too much for it to handle in its context window, then it's going to forget the stuff at the beginning with your instructions, and it's just going to see the ending half of your first book and then the other books,
Mm.
and it's going to be very confused about what it needs to do. So the context window is just how much space you have to work with before the model forgets stuff.
That's still a lot of space, though. I mean, not too many people are
Yeah,
going to be prompting three
you're
books worth of
mhm.
worth of text, right?
You're rarely ever going to go all the way to 128K, and some models have more than that. Like Claude has 200K, Gemini has a million,
Mm.
and yeah, so it's only increasing over time. You're almost never going to run out of that space. So our next term is API, which is Application Programming Interface. So APIs are basically how you can connect to the model from other softwares. And it's not just an AI term. Like it's used in SaaS and software development all the time. It's just any way that you connect one piece of software to another. So in AI, this means how your website chatbot is going to go connect to the ChatGPT API and use their models for whatever your application does. And these can be used in automations, which is a lot of what we do, connecting the best models together to complete a particular task in the best way possible. You need to pull in different APIs for these models, and they'll generally offer more flexibility and fine tuning than what you can do on their own platform.
Mhm. That's why, like with our content generator, we are
Mhm.
interfacing with ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini, but we're doing it at the API level, which is why we can fine tune these outputs even better than what you could do in most cases with just directly prompting an AI.
Mhm. So then another term that's very important is RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. And this is like providing your own data source to the model so that the model, instead of just relying on what it already knows, you can connect it to your own data. Maybe you have a database of your customers and you want to ask questions about which customers are going to a certain event you have set up. So if you give your model access to that RAG database, then it can answer questions about that it couldn't do just out of the box. Or a lawyer could upload a bunch of case files that are bigger than the context window and just have it access the important parts and answer questions about a large set of data.
Mm. So, like, if you were an author and you had a whole bunch of books and articles you've written, you could upload all of those into a RAG system and then
Mm.
basically like AI query yourself or all of the content that you've written.
Mm. And RAG is important both for adding custom data sources, but also because of a core limitation of these models, which is our next term, knowledge cutoff. Knowledge cutoff is basically what date the model was trained up to. These models are very expensive to train. They'll cost hundreds of millions of dollars in many cases to do a training run to make one of these models. So they're not going to be doing this all of the time. Any given model might be 6 months old in terms of when it was last trained. So that means it doesn't have recent information. It doesn't know anything that happened yesterday, for example. Sort of like an expert that woke up from a 6 month coma. They knew everything about everything 6 months ago, but anything that's happened since then, they'll have no idea about. They're still extremely useful, but if you give them tools for things like searching the web or your RAG database, it's going to be a lot more up to date. A lot of these AI platforms like ChatGPT have built-in RAG for document uploads. For example, ChatGPT calls theirs GPTs, Claude calls them projects, Gemini calls them gems, Perplexity calls them spaces. And they let you upload your documents and knowledge bases and give them custom instructions that tell the model how you want it to behave with this information.
That's something too where we want to always want to keep security in mind, right? Like if
Mhm,
you upload all of your own content into a Claude, what are they, Claude projects or is that what
mhm,
they call? They're going to keep that stuff safe. That's just for your own use. Whereas if you upload it into a Gemini gem, they're probably going to use that data to train on, right?
mhm. So ChatGPT's custom GPTs allow you to share them and upload them to a marketplace. So I can show you a quick look at that. Let me share my screen here.
These GPTs are really pretty amazing, and you can create your own. So Adam's going to show you the marketplace of GPTs that
Mhm,
other people have created, but you could really easily create your own GPTs. I created one and I gave it examples of my writing, different articles I've written, LinkedIn posts that I've written. I gave it a document that says here's my point of view on a whole bunch of different things. So now when I create an article, I go to my personal GPT and I tell it to write the article, and it knows to write it in my style, following my style, and also with my point of view. And when it writes content, it's really, really good. I mean, I still obviously edit my content and finalize it, but it's pretty remarkable
mhm.
how well it can generate content when you give it that kind of detailed examples to work from.
Yeah, so these custom GPTs, they have their marketplace for them, and you can connect them to your data sources, give them instructions, and even if you're a developer, you can connect them through to other APIs and their own apps. So, for example, Consensus can go and access scientific literature databases through an API. And this one, Presentations and Diagram Generator by Show Me, can access their API to create diagrams and presentations that you can't easily do with base ChatGPT. And they can partner with people to do things like export them to Miro. So, say we want to create a diagram. Let's put it in diagram mode here because they have these preset modes that it knows what to do with, because they've given it their own custom instructions. So we want to create a diagram explaining a decision tree of what LLM to use based on your criteria like speed, security, and reasoning. And what this is going to do is it's going to plan its flowchart. It's going to connect to another API to render it out and give it back to you. Now, since this is just a custom GPT to create these diagrams, it doesn't really have access to information about the latest LLMs. So what it tells us here isn't necessarily going to be accurate. But if you were to provide your own research and then have it create a diagram based on your other pieces of content, then that can definitely be very helpful and provide additional value. So it shows us this graph here. If you need to choose your LLM, is speed important? Gives us this whole tree, and you can even bring it into Miro where you can edit it and view it in a sort of nicer interface here. So, need to choose an LLM. Is speed most important? Yes, use a lightweight weight model like GPT 3.5. Now that's an outdated model, so it doesn't have that. Its knowledge cutoff is a bit outdated here.
Good example.
Is Yeah, there's an example of the knowledge cutoff in action. Is data privacy critical? Yes. Use an on-device model like Mistral, and they do have some nice open source models. Um, Needs strong reasoning and logic? Yes. Use provide proprietary LLMs like GPT-4 and Claude, or no, use open source cloud models like Mistral and Llama.
Mhm.
So it can create these diagrams for you because you can connect it to APIs and things like that. And there's thousands of these GPTs for various different purposes.
Yeah, it's
You can
amazing.
use
They're
them
all
for
been
writing.
available for free. You can just
Mhm.
drop in, find the one you need, and use it. That's pretty incredible.
Mhm.
So, so we've covered a bunch of terms. We talked about prompt as a term, tokens as a term, context window, how many tokens a particular tool has available to it, APIs, uh, RAG, and then knowledge cutoff as some of these key concepts and terms that you really need to know about. Now, of course, you can go deep in the weeds. There's a whole bunch of, technical level, but these are the kinds of things you should at least just be aware of in terms of terminology, because as you're working with different LLMs, you kind of want to know, you know, how big of a context window does it have, and um, does it have a RAG capability so that you could upload your own documents and so forth. What we want to move to next is some of the more recent advancements that have occurred in AI, and again, this is recent as of April 2025. So things change fast. But there are a few major advancements that pretty much all of these models are working with and toward and improving. And the first one that we want to talk about is reasoning. And it's a pretty big deal. Back in the essentially around the fall of 2024, ChatGPT introduced reasoning into their O1 and O3 mini models. And reasoning basically is like giving the LLM an opportunity to think about how it's going to respond. So, we in the intro video we talked about how these neural nets are just coming up with an answer, and then as they're answering, it's just predictive technology. What word would come next? What word would come next? And they just start that right away, and they create content, and they're pretty good at it. But imagine if you give the AI a chance to think about how it's going to answer first. And I don't know, you may have seen in some of our demos that when we put the prompt in, the LLM is actually kind of going through a process. It says, okay, they asked for this, which means I'm going to have to know about this, and I may have to look this up. I might have to search about this, and then I'll probably support this. And it's thinking about how it's going to go about answering. It's akin to if you were on a panel, let's say at a conference, and somebody asks you a question because you're an expert on some subject matter, and you all of a sudden just in front of all these people have to start answering, right? So you start talking, and you hope that you'll be able to make a coherent statement about their question and answer it for them. Hopefully, if you're an expert, you're able to do that on the fly. But imagine the quality of the answer you give in that context versus they ask you the question, and now you have a couple minutes to think about how you're going to answer, kind of maybe structure it in a three-point response, and even do a quick Google search to make sure that some of your facts are straight and you have the most recent information. The quality of your answer with that couple minutes of reasoning is going to be so much better. So this big advancement, it's not that they changed the model so much as they just gave it this layer where the model gets to think first about how should I go about answering this prompt. And then once it kind of it forms and shapes itself, then it pulls the answer out of the LLM. So it's a pretty big advancement, and I think so. ChatGPT was definitely the first to launch that, but Adam, I think do
Mhm.
all of the major players we talked about pretty much have this capability now?
Yeah, pretty much all of them do at this point at various levels of quality.
Hmm.
One thing that reasoning reminds me of is that meme from The Office. Just show it really quickly here. It's sometimes I start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way. And that's sort of what a lot of AI models are doing by default. When you add reasoning, it's gonna do a lot better with that response.
Right, right. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's such a funny one. Um, So we have reasoning, and just FYI, if you're going to use reasoning, so you have to turn on models that have reasoning. So in ChatGPT, for example, they're based, I think the default is 4.0. uh, that does not have reasoning, right, built into it.
Yeah.
Whereas
Hmm.
if you change it to O1 or O3 mini, those are its reasoning
Hmm.
models. And so you can see it. Like if you use 4.0 and you just type in a prompt, it's just going to start answering you. Whereas if you go change it to O3 mini, you're going to see it thinking. You're going to see it like doing its thing and then start answering. And so it does slow things down a little bit. So if you're just doing really quick research on basic stuff, leave the default 4.0. You're going to get the fastest kind of response. Whereas if you really need more accuracy, then put it into one of these reasoning modes. And again, I mean, we're talking about, slow being 10 seconds, 15 seconds compared to 4 seconds, let's say. So it's a pretty small difference. But if you're doing a lot of research and a lot of prompts, 10 or 15 seconds in between adds up to some minutes. And if you don't need it, just leave it on 4.0. But if you do need that accuracy, then switch it over, and you're going to get a much better result out of the reasoning models. The other thing, which actually preceded the reasoning model, but that's pretty important, is allowing these online models to go onto the internet and search when they're answering their questions. So Adam mentioned when he was doing the definitions about the knowledge cutoff. And so if you don't know what's happened in the last 6 months, even though you have this incredible brain, you can't answer questions about what was in the news yesterday, right? So but if it can say, well, I'm answering this question, but I also want to go out on the internet and find any additional information that I might not be aware of. Now, it's a little bit limited because you don't know what you don't know, and that's true of a large language model as well. So how do you search for a thing that you don't know you need to know? So there's a gap
Hmm.
still, but because these models can now enable search, it can definitely close the gap quite significantly
Hmm.
between that knowledge cutoff and what's relevant, what's occurring today. Again, takes a little bit longer if you and most of the time, so you'll see like in all of the models, pretty much at least on ChatGPT, you can turn on search mode, and it'll then use search in its answer. If you don't turn it on, it's just using its core brain without adding that search layer. And if you do turn it on, again, it's going to take a little bit longer to get your response back, but it definitely will work. It will give you some better results. And that's one of the things I think when we were talking about Perplexity in our first video. Perplexity was just designed from the ground up to integrate search results in the answers and to footnote each of its answers with where it got that information, so you can go onto that website, check the source, see whether or not it synthesized it properly. So search is really important. So we have reasoning, very important. Search, really important, and those have both elevated the quality and the confidence that we can have in what the AIs deliver in terms of accuracy. The other new advancement that's pretty much, in the last several months, really, is AIs implementing what are called agentic processes. They're introducing agency into these models. So you have this brain, you have sources like the internet, you give it processes like reasoning, but then you can also give it tools or access to tools. So think about being able to, let's say you could turn on access to your calendar. And ChatGPT, let's say, had access to your calendar. And you could then ask it questions about, when was the last time I met with this person? And it could respond. And when do I have availability coming up in the next 2 weeks? Um, and be able to have it access your calendar and even do things. Set up a meeting between these people and look for an available time on our calendars to book that meeting, and also send a Zoom invite, right? If you give AI access to all of these tools, not only can it come up with responses and content, it can actually do things. It can perform tasks. That is a real leap forward, and we're kind of early in these days of AIs that have agency, but it's going to be a really powerful leap forward. What other examples can you think of, Adam, where the
Hmm.
agency aspect that's just recently emerging is going to be helpful?
So there's these computer using agents that can actually interact with a computer through the browser and clicking on things like a person does. And that enables a lot of things that you can't usually do. Like even a search model can search the web to get information, but it can't click around on the website and interact with it to get information. But if you have it using the computer as a tool, then it opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of actually going out and executing tasks that you can't do
So
but
like
without that.
you could say, okay, book me a flight via Travelocity, and it could read
Mm,
the screen, click on the links, find your, tell it when you want to
mm,
fly, give it your price ranges, and do all that for you.
mm.
Kind of.
Yeah, all these companies when they show off their computer using agents, the first thing they always show off is shopping for some reason.
Mm.
Because we've got like the most streamlined interfaces for humans to shop, but they always want to automate that first for whatever reason.
Buy more stuff faster, of course.
Yeah, buy
Um,
stuff faster.
right. So another recent advancement, and this is one that kind of blew my mind, is deep search or deep research.
Mhm.
Um, the example that I would give is I've been researching on all the various privacy and security standards for each of these models, right? So you have all the models we've talked about, or all of the players, all the companies, and then all of their models, and then they all each have different pricing tiers. So if you add all those up, there's probably 24, 36 different, potential models plus tiers. And I wanted to know, well, based on all of those, what are the standards for whether they store your data, whether they keep it private, whether they might train on it? And that was going to be a huge research project. I was in the process of doing that, kind of looking it up, doing some research, and when deep search came out, I was able to put ChatGPT into deep search mode, and you have to do that. You'll see a deep search option. You click that, and you give it your prompt, and I told it exactly that, what I wanted to do, and it took about 7 minutes because it was going and it was doing all the kind of research I would have had to do. Go to each of the things, look at their terms of service, look at other sources, compile it, synthesize it, write the report. And it returned a 26-page detailed report of all of the players, all of the models, all the pricing tiers, and which ones had the privacy, which ones had the security, which ones stored data, which ones would train, which ones wouldn't. That kind of high level research in 7 minutes, that is such a game changer. And so I know ChatGPT has it,
Grok has it. Gemini has it.
Gemini,
Gemini actually had it first, but theirs wasn't as good as the others. They had the initial deep research, and then OpenAI stole the name and made their own product.
right, right. But this tool, this deep search tool, man, if you have a research project and it would normally take humans many, many days, hours to put this together, to write it, to fact check it, now you can get a very detailed research report done, and you could give it that same research report to another deep seek, right? And say, check this for factual, right? And play one
Yeah, you
after over
can.
the other to ensure that, yeah, all of the details in this are complete.
Mhm.
That's a huge game changer. So we talked about some of the recent developments: reasoning, search, agency, and deep search, deep research. These are some of the things in the last 6 months that have come out, and they're continuing to advance these aspects and make them even better. So the last part we want to talk about in this second video are concepts. How should we be thinking about AI? I mean, obviously we've already shown examples, how to prompt things, how to generate images, even generate video, maybe audio clips. So there's all sorts of content generation that can be done, and research, creating research reports that can be done. But I think we need to be thinking about AI not just in terms of what it can generate for us. That's a huge part of it, but it it's changing the way we think about what we ourselves are capable of. There's uses of AI that are not just to come up with some content, but to teach us how to how to do things. So think of AI as having an expert at everything sitting right on your shoulder, sitting right next to you. So anything you want to do that you don't know how to do, it can teach you how to do it. So, for example, I'll give you an example from I own another company called Cuberus, and we do websites for museums. And we recently were working on a project for the New Jersey Vietnam Veterans Memorial and Museum. And their previous website, well, the memorial has all of the names of people from New Jersey who died in the Vietnam War, about 1,500 or so, a little over 1,500 people who died, and you can read all their names. But on the website, they had this biography search, and you could go in and you can search by name, by branch of military, by rank, by where they died, when they died, what county they were from, like all of this metadata. And unfortunately, we were redoing the website, and the previous developer had built that as a custom application. They had coded it and structured it, and it was kind of like their own intellectual property, and they weren't willing to let them have it. They were mad, but they weren't going to give it to them. So we were stuck. We're like, how are we going to recreate this entire application so that we don't lose this functionality? And I was a little bit stumped. I was what they had was 1,500 Word documents in a directory. That's what they had. Each
Mm.
Word document was for each person. And in it, you had the info. You had each person, their rank, their branch of military, all the details that were in that app was from that bio, but it was in normal language. Someone was going to have to go through for each person and read and type into a spreadsheet, that information. And the image was embedded in the Word doc as well. So I'm like, boy, this is going to be a data entry nightmare to recreate this application. But I told ChatGPT my problem, and it suggested using Python to auto extract all the images and to auto extract all the metadata. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but I don't know how to do Python. I've heard of it, but I've never used it. I'm not a Python programmer. And so it walked me through how to install Python. Command line this, and I did it. And then I had to command line the different libraries. And then it created the script, and I had to run the script, and it told me how to do that. And it literally just zoom, all of a sudden I had all the images extracted from those Word docs. And then we extracted all of the paragraphs and put it into a form that we could access via an automation. And then Adam helped me to create an automation that went to each paragraph and looked for the metadata, pulled it into a spreadsheet. So within a few hours, we had all of the metadata extracted, all of the images extracted, and then I could just upload that into WordPress, build a Search and Filter Pro interface. Within half a day, we had replaced this entire application that took this other person probably maybe days or weeks to build originally because he didn't have AI back then. So think of AI and of ChatGPT as as somebody that help you do whatever. And another quick example, I play guitar, and I like to practice chord changes. And there's this Nashville chord system where all the chords in a key are broken into numbers 1 through 7. And I wanted to just create a random number generator. I wanted someone to be able to say random numbers, and I would have to change to that number chord in practicing. And so I asked ChatGPT, hey, can you make me an HTML page that just randomly displays numbers 1 through 7? And it did. And I said, oh, can you make it so I can change the beats per minute and so slow it down or speed it up? And it did. And can you make it so that I can pause it and restart it yet? And it did. So now I just drag this little file over, and it's just displaying me the chords, and I can practice doing the chord changes. Again, like that that would have taken me hiring some programmer to write that script. But instead, within minutes, I had my own custom tool. So we want to be thinking not just about what can it generate, but what can it teach us to do? What can it provide for us that that we couldn't do otherwise? It's really a game changer in terms of our own agency. That it can create these tools that just an audience of one, right? A market of one, software for a market of one, and it's changing things in so many ways. And then in terms of concepts, breaking away from just thinking about its content, thinking about its use cases, how it can teach you to do things. Another thing to keep in mind um, is that AI also has eyes. And I want to just do this quick demo. I'm going to pull up ChatGPT on my phone. So if you open up the ChatGPT app, which I've got here, turn on its audio input version. Hey there, ChatGPT, how are you doing today?
Hey, Eric. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm giving a presentation of your capabilities. And I'm going to turn on my camera so that you can see what I'm seeing. I'm giving a presentation. I'm actually demoing what you can do. And actually, that's me right there. And then that's my son, Adam.
Hello.
Hey, nice to meet you both. This is a cool demo. Let me know if there's anything specific you'd like me to show off.
Yeah, I would. So down here, you can see that this is my script that we're working off of to give this demo. And I want you to see, can you see the line that says AI has eyes?
Yep, I see it. It's right at the top of your summary section.
Right. So do me a favor and read the next bullet point for me.
Sure thing. The next bullet point says, work on an engine, point ChatGPT app at your engine block and ask it to help.
Yeah, so you could do that, right? If I was looking at my engine and I needed to find the alternator and I couldn't find it, you could help me actually identify it from all of the components in an engine.
Absolutely. Just show me what you're looking at, and I can help you identify the alternator or any other component in the engine bay.
That's pretty wild. Thanks a lot, ChatGPT.
No problem, Eric. Glad to help.
So AI is not just something that we're doing on our computers, typing in prompts, getting content made. It's in our pockets. It can see things. It can help us to solve problems. Um, uh, Even things like curing husband disease, right? So when you open the refrigerator and you say, "Where's the ketchup?" and your wife says, "It's right there," and you say, "No, I don't see it anywhere." Well, have point ChatGPT, and it'll probably find the ketchup, so you're not embarrassed because it was right there all along. It's incredible the way that AI is able to completely change the way that we are working and being able to have tools, knowledge, expertise in things that we could never have done otherwise. So it's really broad. It's part of why, as Ironwood, we are interested in helping people to understand this world, to enter this world, to begin how to use this world and use it effectively. And different ways that we're doing that. Obviously, these videos are to help people who are entering into our Zoom advisory calls. So you can get caught up. And as we talk about what's new, new techniques, and then just have discussions amongst ourselves about how we're using it and getting use cases, you have at least the basic fundamentals and understanding of the different moving parts here. We also provide individual single issue consulting. So if you wanted to engage us just because you had a question, you needed to do a research report for something, or you needed to create a logo and you weren't sure what best tools to use or how best to prompt them, we can do individual consulting calls with people on an a la carte basis. We also have a on-call advisory service where we charge our clients a very small retainer just to be able to access us, and then we help you as you need it. Just on a measured hourly basis. So you can reach out to us via Slack or via email. We can set up calls to review your needs, and we just charge by the hour for clients that are on that micro retainer group. And then we also offer services. So like we were talking about with APIs and being able to really dial up the focus. If we need to build automations like our content generator or email automations or all sorts of different ways that we can wire these APIs and these AIs up together to produce tools that make things even more automated, even more efficient. We build those kinds of platforms as well. So I hope that you will join us in our weekly calls or reach out to us if you have any needs. We're happy to help you. We think the world of AI, while a little bit scary sometimes and amazing, really is a huge blessing and a huge it's wealth that we're able to utilize and do things we just couldn't do before. So definitely join us, definitely reach out to us, and we look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye.
Bye.